Okay, so for our next panelist, somebody who I'm a huge fan of, Dr. Veena Howard. She is a professor of Asian religious traditions in the Department of Philosophy at California State University, Fresno, where she holds the endowed chair in Jain and Hindu Dharma. She also serves as the director of the newly endowed M.K. Gandhi Center, Inner Peace in Sarvodaya, and she has a number of amazing publications in those fields. Some of her publications are amongst my favorite, particularly her work on Gandhi's ascetic activism is excellent. I highly recommend it. And today she's presenting on another fantastic topic of great passion of mine, that is the teachings of Shrimad Rajchandra. So everybody, please welcome Dr. Veena Howard.
Hi, good morning, Rajchandra. It's so wonderful to be in the company of people like Kojan and Chris Miller and all these great friends and fans, and I'm a fan of all of you as well. The morning presentations have been just exquisite. And I mean, Chris Miller, you did such an amazing job there. So congratulations. Let me share my screen. Hope you can see it. So I just want to preface my presentations, like Kojan is early in the morning, earlier than, East Coast people or the Europe people. So I became interested in Shrimad Rajchandra through Gandhi. And then, of course, when I became closer and closer to Jain traditions and Jain philosophies, I wanted to do more research on his work, his impact, and also studying him in his own right. Of course, Gandhi's relationship, I will never go away from my mind, but also seeing him a person and a historical individual, amazing individual who shows a different path, not really a complete renunciation, but he navigates both renunciation and action. So the recent studies, for example, Chris Chappell, Bohannig, Kojan himself, explore the Jain practice of prayer, meditation, yoga, and ritual through various texts and traditions. Great book. I highly recommend both of those books to all of you. With regard to the topic of yoga, most scholars primarily focus on the contemplative practices encompassing discipline and meditation. These writings present an image of a practitioner of yoga and meditation as a world renouncer. You give up desires and just completely detach yourself from the world. So what I find, the life of Shrimad Rajchandra, let me put in the presenter mode, presents a unique model of a householder renunciate, what I call it. Shrimad Rajchandra conducted a lucrative business and lived a family life up to the end of his life, navigating both pravrti, renunciation, and pravrti, worldly engagement, and nivritti, renunciation. So in this short presentation, I will explore select biographical writings on Shrimad Rajchandra and Gandhi's own words that draw attention to the binary strands of his contemplative predilections and his life of a householder. More significantly, and this project is ongoing, I just have started, so I'll be looking at more biographies as well. I will show how these biographies generally elevate his detachment from worldly affairs because of the Jain ideology of renunciation, notwithstanding Shrimad Rajchandra's dexterously performing business and living a family life, both at the same time. So I argue that Shrimad Rajchandra presents a modern example of a karma yogi, one who performs detached action as defined in the Bhagavad Gita, and also Samatva Yoga. Now I've been studying that as well recently. I will show that by synthesizing worldly action with spiritual pursuits that inspired Gandhi himself, that how Srimad Rajchandra serves as an example for all of us, for especially the lay followers, although bound by worldly actions, seek a viable path for liberation. So that's my summary of the presentation. So who is Srimad Rajchandra? He is a child prodigy. He is a person of extraordinary powers, a poet, a philosopher, a renunciate, a spiritually accomplished being. And what else is Srimad Rajchandra? He's a householder. Now we're juxtaposing with the other side of Srimad Rajchandra's actions and personality. He's a father. He's a son. He's a businessman, a mentor. So on the right side, we see more as a pravritti, and on the left, we see some of them, nivritti. So a yogi in South Asian traditions, as most of us know, that a yogi's image is renunciation, a meditation, contemplation. John Cord draws on James Mellinson's writings, who defines the term yogi in the South Asian traditions as someone, I quote, who has in some ways renounced the world and thereby engages in conduct that runs counter to the norms of the householder. So I just want to frame my conversation, my presentation through this quote. And it's not just James Mellinson. This is a very ancient divide in Indian philosophy between pravritti and nivritti. As we see Louis Dumont, he says, at the outset, we can assume that there are two kinds of men in Hindu India, those who live in the world and those who have renounced it. And he really, Hindu world, Indian world, pan-dharmic traditions, the bifurcation of the two systems. In the Mahabharata, Bhishma, great patriarch, lauds the path of nivritti. By acts, a living creature is destroyed. Yogins who see the other side of the ocean of life never performs acts. I mean, it's kind of ironic, right? I mean, Mahabharata, he's also a man of action. He's brahmachari, but he's a warrior. But toward the end of his life, he's giving this lesson to Pandavas and whoever wants to listen to his last lesson, teachings, and he says that we should not perform action. So that is kind of frame that we see the yogi has to renounce in order to seek liberation. So pan-dharmic traditions elevating nivritti for liberation is from Patrick Olivelle. He said the household life is a dusty path full of hindrances. While the ascetic life is like the open sky, it is not easy for a man who lives at home to practice the holy life, brahmacharya, in all its fullness, in all its purity, in all its bright perfection. Because the householder life is a mud, we are very difficult for us to really experience that kind of bliss when we're living in the household life. So it's quite interesting that bright perfection we can only achieve when we are in the renunciation stage of life. And then Jacobi notes in Sutta Kritanga Sutra, Sutta Kritanga, he says, men who do not see light, as it were, domestic life, are the beloved of the people. Those heroes free from bondage do not desire life. So it is that one has to renounce in order to really feel the bliss of liberation. But in the Bhagavad Gita, we see, and Srimad Rajchandra read the Bhagavad Gita and quoted the Bhagavad Gita, and he was, both. He was, his mother was a Hindu and Vaishnava, and the father was a Jain. So the Bhagavad Gita says, therefore, giving up attachment, perform actions as a matter of duty, because by working without being attached to the fruits, one attains the supreme. So there is another layer of yoga that one can attain liberation without renouncing this world. By performing their prescribed duties, King Janak and other attain perfection. You should also perform your duties to set an example for the good of the world. So action can be done in a way that is liberating. It doesn't bind us. And the two ingredients are very important in such kind of actions: vairagya and dharma, detachment and a sense of doing everything as a sense of duty. Whatever actions great persons perform, common people follow. Whatever standards they set, all the world pursues. That verse is very important to understand Gandhi and Shrimad Rajchandra both, because Gandhi sees Shrimad Rajchandra doing that, what he eventually does in his life, which is performing actions without being attached to them. So my question is, was Shrimad Rajchandra a karma yogi? I looked up through research, hardly maybe one or two places. They have, he's noted as a karma yogi, but a lot more attention is paid to his renunciation, and he didn't want to really be in the world, but he had to be. So that kind of narrative that emerges. So the two main ingredients, vairagya, without passion, without attachment, to be disinterested toward the objects of sensual and physical pleasures, is detachment, according to the Tattvartha Sutra. And dharma is to duty and virtue. And it is talks about righteousness, forbearance, modesty, straightforwardness, purity, truthfulness, restraint, austerity, renunciation, the 10 dharmas in the Tattvartha Sutra. So dharma is not simply doing your duty, but doing your duty with all this framework of virtue, of uprightness, doing the right way, ethics, morality, then one is able to do dharma. Sometimes we just see you just do your worldly duty, but I think it's very important to see those components of dharma when we are doing the duty. Renunciation does not mean here completely renouncing the world, renouncing the desires of the fruits of actions. So Shrimad Rajchandra was a householder. And the stories, the biographies that discuss his worldly life, they always say he was not eager to get married in the least. Despite harboring a deep innate desire for renunciation, the twist of fate created by his preordained karmas carried him to the marriage altar. So it's like, of course, the karma always plays an important role in what we do, where we are. But I think there is a choice. Did he have the choice to not go to the marriage altar? Or was it all karma? So it really is because we cannot see what is laid out for us. So, but here, always the emphasis is made on that he didn't want to do it, but he did it because of his past karma. So that's very important to note. And then it says, harboring an intense desire for complete renunciation, Shrimadji's inward journey was soaring high. However, his parents did not grant him the permission to sever all worldly ties and adopt the ascetic life. In a twist of fate, he tied the nuptial knot with Jagatbai in 1888 in Marobi. So accepting the outcome of the past karma, he ventured into the jewelry business in Mumbai. A fine confluence of wisdom and morality, he left a lasting impression on anyone who met him. He spent nearly a decade as a householder. Nonetheless, dharma reflected in his every activity. His heart found no other solace than the self. So if we see it that he did get married, he had children. right? I mean, he has kids, he has a fine, very lucrative business, he's very successful at it. But then the emphasis that he's really is detached. And Gandhi quotes one of his poems in his writings, and that's on Vairagya. He said, when shall I know that state supreme? When will the knots outer and inner snap? When shall I breaking the bonds that bind us fast? Tread the path trodden by the wise and the great. Withdrawing the mind from all interest, using the body solely for self-control, he desires nothing to serve any ulterior end of his own, seeing nothing in the body to bring on a trace of the darkness of ignorance. So this is a poem that Gandhi quotes of Shrimad Rajchandra in his writings on Vairagya. So that is the how we live in the world is through Vairagya and Dharma, as I mentioned earlier. So my emphasis also that he cared for a householder. He didn't want everyone to be, of course, our goal is liberation. Renunciation is eventually our goal, but he was concerned about how we live life like a householder. So he gave his 12 best householder, lesson 12 advice to householders in his Mokshmala. And I recently got his whole collected works, Shrimad Rajchandra's in Hindi, so I'm going through it. Even while dwelling in his worldly householder life, the best Shravaka who has contacted best teachers, hears their teaching carefully, is discriminative and modest, is successfully undergoing spiritual discipline, his order of a householder becomes praiseworthy. So worldly life's the best Shravaka. So he is living like a Shravaka, even though he's living in this world. Such best householders perform samika. I think I saw in the comment for someone, take a vow of equanimity, equanimous behavior, shamapanna, to beg pardon before Sri Bhagavan Mahavir for any of his faults, and Kohvihar, Pratyakham, a vow not to take 4 types of food at night, to practice restraint and follow injunctions of good behavior for the whole of his life, and niyam, observe some vows for this specific period of time. So he goes very details about how a good householder live, and women should be treated like a good mother, their mother or sister. And then I'm not going to read everything. I'm just going to show you that how much he is concerned about a householder's life and how he, page after page, he's telling a householder how to live a good life that one can make progress. So again, he gives due respect to his parents, his wife, his sons, munis, and preceptors. So that's what Shrimad Rajchandra is doing. He is caring for his mother, he's caring for the family, he's caring for, and he is living a very good life. Good life here is the life of spirituality. And then he's a very good father and he's a very good son. We don't know much about his children, and I would like to know, maybe it's available information. And then he writes in his best householder that he gives religious discourses to his parents, keeps the house clean, behaves intellectually, and teaches his wife and children lessons of modesty and humility. I mean, there is a lot of information which I had not seen before until just a few weeks ago. Thanks to Kojan for giving me this opportunity to study more. He welcomes a guest. So how do you become a good householder? By doing your duties completely filled with spirituality, filled with those 10 elements of dharma. And then again, how do you live? Never send a beggar. Always give alms. Keeps his capacity. Library of good religious works. I love that. Have a good library of works that you can study and think about. And then he has another interesting idea about, he gives daily rules of behavior and respectfully behave with your parents and start your worldly actions very carefully so as to be free from hurting any living being and not forgetting soul's benefit. So do both at the same time, not simply one or the other. So again, give your meals to others, the saints and the family, whoever guest comes to and discipline life. Have a fixed time for meals and movements, as well as for study of religious scriptures and reflecting on philosophical works. So it's very much into intellectual pursuit as well as spiritual pursuit and living a fulfilled. And I love that. And sleep at the fixed time. I think Kojan will love that. He's very diligent about it. So I'm trying to. So he says, okay, go, what to do. So it's just so fascinating for me I learned so much personally, since we're talking about engaged Jainism, from this individual. And in Gandhi's writings, this doesn't show up, what I had to study. And especially in Hindi works, I have not looked at in Gujarati, but I met with Rakesh Bhaiji a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him, I said, do you think he's a karma yogi, Shrimad Rajchandra? He said, yeah, you can say that, so it was interesting to get the validation. So just quickly on Gandhi and Shrimad Rajchandra. So he says, whatever he was doing at the moment, whether eating or resting or lying in bed, he was invariably disinterested toward things of the world. I never saw him being tempted by objects of pleasure or luxury in the world. So again, he's practicing, he's a model, he's a role model, a living role model for people. I watched his daily life respectfully and at close quarters. He accepted whatever he was served at meals. His dress was simple, a dhoti and shirt, and an angarkha, and a turban of mixed silk and cotton yarn. And I just began to imagine Shrimad Rajchandra right there. So vivid description. I do not remember that these garments used to be strikingly clean or carefully ironed. It was the same to him whether he squatted on the ground or had a chair to sit on. In the shop, he generally squatted on the gadin. So he is in my opinion, he's a exemplary householder. It is generally believed that the spheres of practical affairs or business and spiritual pursuit of dharma are distinct forms of incompatible with each other, pravritti and nivritti. That it's madness to introduce dharma into business, and we should succeed in neither if we made any such attempt. Well, if this belief is not false, there is no hope for us at all. There is not a single concern or sphere of practical affairs from where dharma can be kept out. Shrimad Rajchandra Bhai showed through his life that if a man is devoted to dharma, this devotion should be evident in every action of life. And that is my thesis statement. So it's really is the karma yogi, you see. Kojan, how much time do I have? A couple of minutes?
Time is about up. You're about 1 minute. That's okay if you want to wrap it up. Take just a minute.
So he disapproved the idea that I'm just going to skip that. So I've been reading a little bit on Samatva Yoga, the fundamental yoga of Jainism. So this is from Sagaramal Jain, who wonderful essay called The Historical Development of Jain Yoga and Impacts of Other Yoga Systems on Jain Yoga. And he talks about Samika or Samatva Yoga as a principal concept underlining Jainism. It is the first and foremost of the 6 essential duties of both monks and householders. In order to explicate the nuanced meaning and use of this word, we must first explore how it's translated and defined in various sources. The Prakrit term Samya can be translated into English as a variety of ways, such as observance of equanimity, viewing all beings as oneself, conception of equality, harmonious state of one's behavior, integration of personality, as well as righteousness in the activities of mind, body, and speech. And that is Samya Yoga. I'm asking whether it is Karma Yoga when it's practiced as a householder in the householder stage of life. So Srimad Rajchandra had a choice to leave house anytime. That's my argument. But he remained householder until the last moment, even though he increasingly became attached from worldly affairs and meditated. He, last word of his was to his brother, please take care of the mother, our mother. He wanted to be a good son, fulfilled his duty of a father, husband, son, friend, and a guide, guided to become a good householder. Lots of letters he wrote to people, giving wisdom to people, giving guidance, giving knowledge. Did not take Sallekhana vow despite his grave illness. He went through the whole idea and he gave in meditation, sitting up very gracefully, left his body, exemplary to householders, how to remain in this world a karma yogi. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Yeah, wow, what a powerful presentation, Dr. Howard. Of course, I'm always so inspired to hear you talk, especially about this topic in particular. It's such a wonderful subject. I too got interested in Shrimad probably 2 decades or longer ago, based on Gandhi's writings. And so it's so nice to see increase in scholarship in that direction. So thank you very much for sharing.